Hi everyone, this is Julie Bruns. Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. I want you to thrive and be happy, peaceful, and content, no matter where you are on your journey. This podcast shares stories that will show you how it can be done, no matter what your circumstances. You'll be inspired and come away with a new spark of an idea. Never forget, anything is possible. New episodes are released every Wednesday. Subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review. This helps others find our content and get happier sooner. To possibility and beyond. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Peace and Possibilities podcast. My guest today is Erin Hatzikostas.
Nailed it.
So Erin and I met, well, this is the first time we're speaking, but I saw her on a TEDx talk. I think it was in October. Was it October?
October 10th, yeah.
Yeah. So just over a month ago. And I watched it because Dr. Wayne Purnell and I have done work together. So I was on there to see him, and I tuned in a little bit early to get the other speakers. And you're one of I think I saw maybe 4 speakers. And I watched you that day, and it was just fun to watch you. And I hadn't heard of you or I didn't know who you were, but I was like, I just loved your energy. Yeah, no, I loved your energy, and I loved your message about being authentic. And I love it. And I just was like, I want to talk to her because she looks like she loves what she does. And that's what this podcast is all about. And the more people that can learn about other people that love what they do, the sooner they can get there. So that's why we're talking today.
I love it so much. Thank you for having me, Julie. And thank you for the reach out was very authentic. It was, for your listeners, of course, this is COVID time, so everything's weird. So we had a live stream. So we actually had this weird, like, larger audience than you normally would have. But of course, people were in and out and we couldn't see them. So it was really nice to, of course, I heard from a lot of friends and followers, but it was nice to hear from some strangers, if you will, like you. It was done. So thank you so much for having me here.
And I love how easy it is just to reach out, because I am one of those people that it is authentic. And when I say I saw this or I felt this and I'd love to talk to you, and sometimes I never hear from people, most of the time I hear something, but it's like, well, that's the truth. So if it rings true to you and you want to talk to me, great. And if it doesn't, then at least I said what I wanted to say. And it's usually something nice anyways, and a thank you. So it's even more fun when people reach back and say, yes, let's talk, and learn more about, because obviously when you're reaching out to someone like that, it's because something spoke to you and you want more of whatever you felt or saw. So it's always nice when you can connect with people that are like-minded too. It helps.
Yeah. And I'd love to ask you, because I'm so curious, was there one thing in the talk that, like, you're like, oh shit, or like, that really hit me, that landed?
I'd have to probably watch it again to be super specific, but when I remember that you talking about being authentic, you were just like, listen, everyone, I just remember, I'm paraphrasing, but you were like, you're going to be in a room with people that are not being themselves. And when you are not being yourself, you're not being true to anything that's happening in the situation. You're not helping anyone. It's not going to be better for you. Why not just risk it and be yourself? Because that's the only person you can really be. And if we were all doing that, how much better specifically the business world and corporate world would be. I spent a lot of time in there. I feel like if everyone was just not scared to be themselves and just truly say what they want to say, it would just be such a better experience all around. So that's one of the big takeaways I got.
Yeah, I love that. And the reason I ask it, because I don't, again, it's not a test, right? Because what I wanted to do with the TED Talk, right? Like, ideas worth sharing. And it was funny when I was writing it, there's always in a TED Talk, you have to compress it, right? And so there's things you want to say and points and that you want to draw together that you just don't have time to do. And then it hit me as I was going through the process that, people want to make those connections. I want there to be some interpretation, right? I want to give a clear message and how, my journey and what I'm trying to bring across. But that's what I'm most curious, right? Because it's not actually, as of the time of this recording, it's not out yet. And I'm just curious the interpretations and, how people take it. And it won't ever offend me if I'm like, well, that's not really what I meant, because as long as it stirs something in you, that's all I care about.
I love that you're saying that, because you're right. No matter what my answer was, like, there is no wrong answer. It's just what, it's a feeling I had from you. It's a comfort. It's unauthentic. You were being authentic. You were being funny. You're being real. So, and in what's that saying? Like, people will always might not remember what you say, but they're always going to remember how you made them feel.
Exactly.
Yes, and that's like the best compliment when you left there and you're like, gosh, I just felt good. Energy was good. All of that, right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's so good to hear. It's interesting because my son, I got his feedback, right? So part of what I talk about is including your kids. Sorry, I'm like totally taking over.
No, I love it.
My 9-year-old, who is definitely more of the me, right? He got more of my DNA. I was talking to him on the way to hockey practice, and he had watched it. They'd watched it live. And I said, Mick, what did you think of the talk? Right. And to be honest, I was looking for just like some self like love. Right. Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't really looking for
Awesome,
analysis. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he said, well, first of all, you swore too much. You could have said heck, because I say hell a couple of times. And that other time he was actually watching it with me, and he's like, you could make that sugar. So I say, can I swear?
Yeah.
I say shit show. And he said, you could have said sugar show. And on that one, I was like, well, not quite the exact meaning, but
Yeah.
so he said that. And then, so I said, okay, I respect that. Thank you for telling me that. And I said, anything else? Now that was now my grab of like, okay, you gave me the one criticism, right? Like, now let's hear the good stuff. And he said, well, you also used your hands a lot. And Mom, this is a TED Talk. People come to listen to you, hear you talk, not to like move your hands and stuff. And I said, okay, thank you for that feedback, which was interesting because I listened to a podcast a couple of weeks ago that said some of the best TED Talks, what they have in common is that they use their hands a lot, right? So of course, being the mature mother that I was, I brought that back to Mick, because we're always trying to like, I'm right, you're right. But the reason I brought this up, so then I literally had to prompt him. I said, okay, that's great feedback. So Mick, was there anything good that you liked about my talk? And he said, well, Mom, you did a talk about authenticity and you were authentic. And I said, okay, perfect. And then of course I was like, well, and part of my authenticity is that I use my hands, but so I'm glad that you got that feeling.
Stinker. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you got that feeling too.
That's so funny. Yeah. Out of the mouths of babes, right? I have 2 boys. They are 18 and 23 now, but especially the younger one would be more like, sounds like your son, where he's like, okay, well, I saw this and I saw that, and you could try this, Mom, and try that. And it's like, it's real. They're being honest, but you're like, well, yeah, I could, but I wish I would have asked you a more specific question, because I don't really care about those things or whatever it is mentioned. That's so funny. But the interesting conversations are never, it's never something you have to look for, right? Kids like that. So funny.
Not at all.
So I want to talk about what you're doing now. So I know that, I don't know your whole story. I know that you have a book coming out, so we can talk about that. And I know that you are a speaker, and then I know you have your own company, but like, so tell us what you're doing now, and then tell us how you got to this place. And did you see yourself with this career? And when you started, like when you graduated high school or college, like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. So my company is called Be Authentic Inc. I've been doing it for just under 2 years, and it's still becoming, if you will. It's the best way to describe it. It's offbeat career and leadership development. And in fact, when I was thinking about going into the career and leadership space, first of all, normal is my kryptonite. Like doing anything normal is my kryptonite. And so it actually wasn't my first choice when I had decided to make this pivot, because there's a bazillion executive coaches. There's a bazillion leadership groups. They're like a dime a dozen. They're not really, but I just didn't want to be a dime. And then the same thing that hit me, which I talk about in the TED Talk too, and then I freaking have to keep telling myself, even when I was writing the book over and over again, you shouldn't not do something because you hate the way it was done before. You can do it your own way. And so my career and leadership company is like basically everything that I don't like, we're reverse engineering it. So for example, my podcast co-host and I, we sat down on my porch one time and we were like, what do we hate about women's conferences? And like the flow did not stop. It was like 25 items. And we said, okay, we're going to design something that we want. We're going to reverse engineer everything. And my kind of motto, which I came up with when the same little guy, when Mick and I were driving to hockey practice one night, and it's half an hour each way, so just constantly have things going on. This is early in my company, and he was eating a bag of goldfish, which of course is like the staple for kids. And I looked at the bag of goldfish, and I'm like, that's it. That describes what I want to build with a company, which is a goldfish cracker approach. So it's bite size, it's addictive, and it's a little bit cheesy. And so that's kind of the way I describe it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's the company. And we're still figuring out the model, and I'm dabbling with all kinds of things. I do career coaching, I do speaking, writing the book, as you mentioned, the podcast. But at the end of the day, our mission is to radically change the corporate workforce, or really workplace in general, not just corporate, but starting there. And it's all based on this: what breaks my heart, what pisses me off, which is a great question. I highly suggest your listeners to ask themselves. Like, there's so many things we could do in life as entrepreneurs, or just as humans in general, in work, in life. But at the end of the day, if you can figure out what really breaks your heart or what really pisses you off, and go out there and conquer that, that's what to do. And what pisses me off is that the workplace is just, it's miserable in so many ways. There's such a fakeness. There's obviously, the indicators are still bad. Diversity is still an issue. Employee engagement, by all the Gallup studies, it's about 1/3 of the people are engaged, which, if you ask what that is, it's people give a shit about their job. And that's a problem. People don't. So I left a pretty darn lucrative, high paid, good career. And I didn't leave it to do small things. I'm on a mission to really radically change the workforce, and authenticity is, as you learned, my secret weapon to do that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I started my business last October is when I officially started it, but I quit my job in June this year, and to help companies with employee engagement, like we were talking about. Yeah. So my workshops are all, they're kind of like leadership development, but they're really just topics that everyone can relate to, that help people feel more connected and more satisfied and more engaged in their jobs. So I love that you are, because same thing, I started my company because I felt I started these workshops because I felt disconnected at my current company. And I knew I wasn't the only one who felt disconnected. And which is why I wrote my book, which is the same topics that I speak about in my workshops, because all of those topics are universal. All those topics will help you become more engaged and happy and content and peaceful, loving what you're doing. And who wouldn't want to be around people that do that in their corporate job, whether they have to be sitting at home on meetings or in an office. Like that's what I was saying too. Everywhere you go, I wanted to see happy people everywhere I went. And they were like they were not a dime a dozen. They were the opposite. Like 1 out of every 10 people was happy. And I would gravitate to
they were the $2 bill.
Yeah. And they were like the ones that would be like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, it's going fine. Can I talk to you more? Like, wow, thank you for asking. Let's talk more. But you didn't get that. Everyone was just so like tunnel focused and not connected and thinking they couldn't. I don't know. It was just, I love that you're trying to change that, because that is something that pisses me off. And that is something that has been, I think everyone just, especially leaders, right? They're looking at the bottom line and how can they make more money? It's like, well, you can make more money when people who work for you are really happy and engaged.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's the key. Like, what we're setting out to do isn't fluffy, fuzzy, feel good, right? Like the reason we're doing it is, yes, we want people happier, but the reality is there's a business case for it. 100%. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Keep doing it. And so let's talk about your what you were in the corporate world before this. Did you know, did you say I want to be a business owner one day, or did you say like I love my corporate job but I'm just not happy? Or how did that, like you're doing what you really want to do, but was it something always that you saw yourself doing?
No, I mean, I think like with anyone, it's an evolution, and my strategic planning, my strategic thought process never went out too far, although I've sort of re-engineered how I think about that. But no, I actually, my career started in college when I had went to school for engineering, just because I was good at math, right? And when you're that age, you think there's like 10 professions, and the one that's good at math, is an engineer, probably. Hated it. Kept taking math classes and taking pre-reqs. And my roommate came home one day. She was a year older. She was in the business school, and she was so freaking excited. And she's like, Erin, I have found the career for you. It's high pay, it's low stress, and you have to be good at math. And you're like the only person I know that's good at math. It's called an actuary. Oh. And I had no idea what that was. I grew up in the Midwest, not very close to, now I'm out in Connecticut, which was at one point the insurance capital of the world, which means it's also the actuarial capital of the world.
Okay.
And so this was 1995, 96. So, you know, what did I do next? I didn't Google it. I went to the library and I found some really boring, you know, tan off-white book pamphlet that literally listed all the names of the companies, their addresses, and a phone number that employed actuaries. I still didn't even really know what it was, but I think for myself, but I'm also a fast mover. So at that age, I was very impressionable. I was like, oh, you say I should do this? I pay a little stress, I'm going to go do it. And so I looked at it and I noticed a pattern that a lot of them were out in Connecticut, and said, okay, I'm going to try to find Connecticut on a map and see if I can get an internship. And so I was hired into working for Aetna, Aetna's their actuarial program. And I never forget the summer of the internship program. Of course, we had like our assignment, but we also had these learning, like I think it was maybe every Friday or every other Friday we had a speaker or whatever. Okay. And one of them, they had us do a Myers-Briggs assessment. And it was hilarious because it was just one of those, like, there were only 12 of us in the program. There's maybe 3 or 4 other advisors, but we were like in this big hotel ballroom doing it because Aetna at the time owned this hotel. And so we took the test, and then as good actuaries do, they got really excited to compile the results, and they compiled all the results. And I'll never forget, we're in this ballroom, right? So there's this huge screen, bigger than we needed, but they projected the results in sort of this matrix of what everybody got from their Myers-Briggs. And all I remember is looking up, and I was all by myself. And I remember thinking, maybe that's a sign. And so I actually—
That's a screen sign, right?
That's a massive, like literally sign, like, and people would say it to me too, right? Like when they'd meet me, they're like, wait, you're in the actual program? Like, you're sure you're not supposed to be in sales or something? I was obviously very extroverted and social, and I actually came back and entered into their program. So if you don't know the actuarial profession, you have to take a series of exams, pretty intensive, graded on a curve. I always have to tell people, graded on a curve, right? So you're competing against all these other math wizards exams. And I took, over a couple of years, I took maybe 5 or 6 of those exams, and I failed 5 or 6 of those exams. Wow. And the good news was that it felt weird, right? I was the salutatorian of my class. I got, you know, high honors in college. I wasn't used to failure, right? In the terms of academics. And, but I don't know if it was the Myers-Briggs or, you know, little poofs and puffs of inspiration. You know, I had a boss one time when I failed an exam, and she was an actuary, and I was down. And I remember her saying to me, you know what, Erin, you're going to manage actuaries someday. And that was a big deal, right? I was 23 years old. I was failing. But, you know, obviously what she was saying is that I had something in me bigger and different. And so my career evolved. The company was very large. So I was able to sort of, every time I was like eager for something new, I would take on a new role. And I had my first big girl job. I was running international business development for the company, you know, pretending I was way older. You know, I'd wear my glasses and, you know, crap about, you know, I was over, you know, in the UK working with the Department of Health and all these crazy things. And so for me in that role, one of the biggest lessons I learned, I was really scared to take it. And I talk a little bit in the TED Talk about another time where I was like, I said no at first, right? But what I realized, a couple things. One, my fear was more about becoming somebody I didn't want to become than it was about not being able to do the job, right? Like I didn't want to have to sacrifice and compromise, as I talk about, you know, my family or my health or who I am. But I also realized, like most people do, that nobody really knows what they're doing. And that if you take have this 50% rule that I coach people to now. If you want to continue to propel yourself forward, every new job or thing you start or assignment, you really have to be 50% uncomfortable. And if you're not taking on a new role that kind of meets that test, which the good news is 50% you already know, right? So it's not all bad. That's the best way to catapult. So I started to see in some of those roles where I was, had some major blind spots, but like I would start to do well, and like, my career would start to skyrocket. I would start, people knew me that didn't know me before and get recruited. And so for a number of years, I took on a number of different roles. And I always, to your question about wanting, I always kind of was coined both by myself and I remember others, like kind of an entrepreneur, so I was one of the threads I was always working on that. Okay, here's a blank sheet of paper. Let's go build it. And obviously within a company, that's a little different than being a true entrepreneur, but there's some of the very same facets. I've fundraised, within large corporations. I've, sold business cases. I've figured out how to do things that had never been done before. And so I always did thrive on that, but I was never like, I want to be, right? Like I was fine with that within the corporate setting. And then really, my journey took me into a wholly owned subsidiary of Aetna called Payflex. And long story short, I ended up becoming the CEO of that company, which I talk about in the TED Talk, and crushing it, like really crushing it. The company was in really bad shape. And in 3 years, I did a massive turnaround. And that's when I started to, at first go, I feel kind of guilty because the job wasn't easy. Look, I had, I definitely had some fire drill weekends and moments, but for the most part, I was like, this should be harder. And as I sort of got through the end of that and started to itch for something new, I realized that, it was actually my authenticity that wasn't just making life better for me. It was my authentic leadership, my authentic approach, upwards, downwards, sideways, that was actually driving the results. This was why people, like best talent, was flocking to our organization, right? Like I was getting the emails and the phone calls like, hey, if you have a job, and, for some of the best, people there. So my venture out to entrepreneurship didn't come out of like always wanting to be an entrepreneur. It came out of the itch that I used to always get every 3 or 4 years. And so after that turnaround, I started to itch, right? And it was that classic, I'm sure your listeners can relate to this, right? It's sort of this, like, it almost feels like you have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other, right? And the angel is like telling you, like, you know what, you deserve this, Julie. Like, you earned this, it's easy, and you know who to go to, and you can read an email quickly and figure out the answer, and you can go home and turn off your computer at 5. But then, like, the other guy on the other shoulder, call him the devil, maybe he's the good guy, I don't know, devil in the white hat, is like, but here's the thing, you're not motivated, you've got this sort of miserable feeling, you feel lazy, you don't feel like you're doing your best work. And that's because you do your best work when you're challenged, when you're exponentially learning, when you're trying to figure out stuff you've never figured out before. And so that itch, I had become quite in tune with it, but this one was different. This one was like, oh shit, I have a feeling it's not going to be scratched by taking on another role within the enterprise like this time. And I was traveling for business, and I met this nice woman in the Southwest, sort of cattle call line, and she was in her 50s. And so we got chatting, and we ended up sitting next to each other on the plane. And she ran her own company. She was, former corporate and HR. And then, for many, many years, she had left and started her own small, HR consulting company. And I just asking her all these questions, and she seemed so happy. And I'd asked her many, many questions. And finally I paused and I said, look, I'm sorry I'm asking you so many damn questions, but here's the thing. I kind of feel like I'm ready for what's next. And I think it might be my own thing. And then I sort of retracted. I said, that's really stupid of me, because right now my reputation is at like an all-time high. The parent company had, they've been really trying to keep me. They've been sort of throwing, in fact, the just named head of CVS Corporation, Karen Lynch, who is now the CEO of a Fortune 10 company. I mean, she was a big sponsor of mine, trying to throw out opportunities for me to do next. And so anyways, I told this woman on the plane, I said, I'm thinking about it, but like, this is so stupid of me. And she just looked at me so like quickly, succinctly, and just matter of factly and said, who says this is the top? And I was like, oh my God, right? And instantly the metaphor like became 3D in my head. And I could picture myself on this mountain peak, certainly not necessarily at the top, but then looking out at all these other mountain peaks that I didn't even know where they were, but I knew they existed. Mm-hmm. And that was the, I mean, there was a lot of catalysts, but that was the catalyst for me to say, I don't know what it is, but I will regret it more if I don't figure it out than if I stay. And once I got to that place, any fear of leaving, any fear of, failure or all the things, right? Mostly giving up the biweekly paycheck, let's be honest, all went away because my fear was so much higher that I could potentially, I had already been working 22 years, that I could potentially go my entire working life and not know what those mountain peaks look like and not scratch that curiosity. And that's when I decided to leave and eventually find my way to what I'm doing.
I love that it's almost always to a stranger. I feel like there's someone like random person in the airport or you're getting coffee, you just make this connection with someone and all of a sudden you're like, I hadn't thought about that before. She just said that, and she doesn't even know you well enough to say like the thing that made you like stop and realize this was a defining moment. She didn't even know what those words were going to be. She just said what she wanted to say authentically, right, to you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're like,
and I luckily for LinkedIn, because of LinkedIn, I tell her often, so we're connected. And she's like, oh, no. And I'm like, nope, I give you so much credit.
That's awesome.
It's important, right? Like to tell people how they've affected our trajectory.
100%. I was just telling someone one of my sons was telling me about who was it? It was my nephew. And he said, he's in college now. And he said, I didn't realize how good of a chemistry teacher I had in high school. This chemistry teacher I have now is not teaching me anything. And it's really hard for me. And he's like a straight A student. And I go, you should email that high school teacher and tell him. He's like, I should. Like, he hadn't thought of it, of course. But I said, no, they live for that stuff. He's not in that profession because he's making a shitload of money. And he's there because he wants to make a difference. I'm like, please email him and say, I had no idea such and such. And he's like, okay, I will actually, I'm like, please, they live for that stuff. Oh, I'm so glad you had that defining moment. Something similar happened to me too, but it was the regret or the pain has to be bigger for you to stay than it is for you to jump. And even if you jump and you're wrong, and you're probably thinking the same thing, I said to my husband, I know how to get a really good job. I've been getting good jobs for my whole life. I don't know if I can do this, and so I have to try this. Just like you're trying this. You can always go back and work for one of those great people that mentored you and sponsored you along the way, and that would be nothing wrong with that, right? You've done it before, you'd be great at it.
Nobody's going to go hungry. I mean, we're very blessed.
Yeah.
Like once you've built up that network and that reputation and that skill set, like it is the safety net for the most part is still there.
Yeah. It's a great feeling. Like you can go do this and then you can do that. You can do whatever you want. And
although I'm never going back.
I was in a class last month and she was saying, it was a LinkedIn class and she's like, we're here because we are never going back to working for other people. And I'm like, oh, I like that. Yeah, that's good. It's good. Okay. So final question for you. What would you say, or is there anything you wish you'd learned a little bit earlier in your career or your life? Just had a little bit sooner.
Yeah. One of the things I always say is to listen more, to really understand the power of questions. I think in our career, whether you're working in the corporate world, you're working as a teacher, you're an entrepreneur, especially when we're younger, we sort of feel like we have to prove ourselves and we define our success based on how much we know and contribute and do.
Yeah.
But I learned along the way, not too late, but later than I would like, that the most powerful people really ask the most powerful questions. And that if you spend just as much time formulating those questions and bringing out the power of others as you do at trying to solve complex problems or come up with the answer, your impact can be so much more. So that's, that's something that, I'm still working on myself, but, I wish I would have known, a little bit sooner.
So powerful. One of the chapters in my book is curiosity, because same thing. I've always been a very curious person, which I think you probably have been too, because you're like, you jump right in and figure things out and ask questions. But I don't think people realize how powerful they can be asking the right questions, asking them often, asking them to the right people. And it's just like this, it's a spice of life too. Like ask the right questions and you get this really cool, like that lady asking you that question.
Yeah.
What a big question, and what a great way for you to have this light bulb moment. It's like, just because she asked the right question and was like listening to everything you were saying, and then reflecting back to you what she saw, like, who says this is the end? Who says this is the top? It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, there's so much power in it. I love that that's what you wish you learned. And I wish everyone else would learn that earlier, which is why it's a big topic. So that's awesome. Well, thank you, Erin. Tell people about your book. And so your company name again, and then when's your book coming out and where can they get it?
Yeah, so the company name is Be Authentic Inc. We spell it with just the letter B to be a little sassy, be a little different. And beauthenticinc.com, you can find everything. Yeah, so my book is called You Do You-ish, an executive guide to authentic success. And the book is really about how to not just be authentic. And there's my little guy that I was telling you about. I'm on a podcast interview. Would you like to say hi?
Mick!
Mick, how was school? All right, I'll be there.
Way better than normal because I did this.
Oh, really nice. I'll be there in just a couple minutes, okay?
A couple minutes.
5 minutes. Love you.
3 minutes.
So this is right. This is authenticity. This is this is what happens every day. He just got home. We had an early dismissal today. So the book is really focused on the epiphany I had that I sort of start to address in the TED Talk, which the TED Talk is called "Why You Don't Have to Compromise for Your Career," which is that authenticity for me and for others isn't just this permission and this passive state of being. If you look at the Latin word or the Greek word is authentikos, which actually means to be genuine, but it also means to be original and authoritative. And when I first realized that, I thought, oh my gosh, that justifies what I've always thought, that authenticity isn't, it isn't a synonym for transparency. It isn't a synonym for simply being yourself, especially in the workplace, that there is something much richer and more deep about it. And if there is, and if I can figure out what a framework and a formula for that is and teach that to others, because what happened with me is fairly subconsciously, without putting these words, I realized in my career that I could use my authenticity. So it wasn't just an accident. I would use it purposely to create those stronger connections, to model behaviors for people, to inspire others. And so I wasn't just being, I was doing authentic. So You Do You-ish, it's very sassy. It's very authentic. It's no bullshit, tell it like it is, but it really runs you through really understanding authenticity. It's of course not an academic exercise by any means. Helping people rewrite then what I call, you have to prime yourself though for a new strategy. So rewriting the sucky songs that we sing. So before I teach everybody how to use authenticity as their career strategy, their playbook, we have to do some deep work. We have to get the dresser that you want to paint, and we have to sand it, and we have to prime it, right, and get ready. And a lot of that work is stuff I do as a career coach, right? What are the sucky songs? And then the third part is the framework I call 6 Principles of Strategic Authenticity. And it has an acronym, which is HUMANS. And so I've really boiled down this power of authenticity into 6 components, which is humility, being unexpected, modeling, adapting, narrating, telling stories, and sparking or inspiring. And so for each of those, I walk through, of course I tell fun stories, but I also really coach people on how you can take really small steps to start using your authenticity as this new way of doing work and standing out. And it really helps you, not have to sell out, but instead stand out and get noticed and have great success. And then I wrap it up in the final section, helping people understand that like authenticity is one of the most contagious things in the world. And actually this isn't just about, it's a very selfish like book for them, for their career, but it's also about creating this greater movement that, I'm really setting out to do. So the book is available now for pre-order. Okay. Super excited. We just launched it a couple of weeks ago and we have almost 400 orders already. And then it will ship in February. And if people are interested in pre-ordering, I've got lots of fun bonuses. I've got a Spotify success songs, I call them, playlist. I've got an authenticity playbook. And if you order more books, I've got all kinds of other goodies that you get like ASAP. So super excited for it to hit.
Awesome. Congratulations. I will get all those links in the notes so people can just click on them and go right to them. Thank you, Erin.
You're welcome.
Congratulations on making the career you wanted and taking your success and figuring out how you can help others to get there sooner, which is like through this authentic way and like this better way of being in the corporate world and in the business world. So congratulations for all the good work you're doing. I can't wait to read your book. It sounds really cool.
Same to you. Thank you so much for reaching out. It was so great talking with you.
I hope that all of the college students can get this book in their hands, like in college, like before they go out into the real world. Wouldn't that be nice? Like before they're walking around.
Cut it all off at the pass, right?
Yes, right.
Like, and actually, they are the best conduits. As you watch the younger generation, they're less and less likely to put up with the BS. And so you're right. It's about building an army, and let's start as early. I'm starting with my 9 and 12-year-old, but if it's college or wherever it is, I think it'll be a really important message for.
Yes, go out, speak out at the schools. They need it. So yes, so we can get them early, so they're not like 35, 40 and miserable and then affecting all the people on their team and in their company. Yeah. Congratulations, Erin.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you love this content, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you found us on. You can get all my social media links in the description below. Help us keep the momentum going so that every person can live their lives happily, doing work they love.